Something has fundamentally changed in leftism. Something within the dark, rotting heart of this terrible, no good, very bad movement has changed in recent weeks. Whereas up until this point, there has been some sort of coherence you could find in leftism. If you really tried and looked and recontextualized all their statements and made sure that you understood all of their theoretical nonsense that doesn't exist in reality is taken into account and reconstructed it from some sort of theoretical angle to try and recombobulate all of their sentences to somehow make sense in modern English, recently it's become almost impossible to even do that. Now, when they speak, it seems as though the words that they're saying don't mean anything at all. They're just stapling words and phrases and suffixes and prefixes together with no rhyme or reason, and seem to have no sense of the parts of language they need to be using, or sentence structure, or word usage in general. It seems that they have completely lost the plot, and the question is, why? Why has leftism got to this point? Well, I think I have an answer for that question, and it lies back in what has been a very perennial argument between the left and the right for a very long time now. You see, the right has complained about the left redefining terms for a very long time. It's been decades, and they've continually tried to do this, whether it comes to things like racism, sexual assault, sexual harassment, sexism, or any other set of words that you could possibly imagine having something to do with the left. They have always tried to redefine it in the past, and the right has always come against them. But looking at it recently, I've discovered that I think that this sense of redefining is actually somewhat inaccurate, because redefining a term would assume that you are stripping away the definition that was originally assigned to a word, and then assigning it a new one that would continue on into the future. It's happened lots of times in history, and you can find many examples of it that are either done for innocuous reasons or more politically motivated reasons in many points in the past, whether it be organic or artificial, whatever. And leftists have done this constantly as well. Take racism, for example, where they have redefined racism from simple prejudice against a race or some other thing like that, to racism is now prejudice plus power, a definition that they don't follow themselves when it comes to places where black people are obviously in power, or when the system structures are going against another racial demographic, such as white people or whatever, or Asians, as it happens. They haven't followed that definition, and the reason for that is they aren't actually intending on redefining the term and giving it a new definition. What they're intending on doing is undefining the term. What they want to do instead of redefining a term is they want to remove the definition entirely and leave the word empty. And the reason they want to do this is for the sake of one of their favorite pet words, that being inclusion. And this is evident in much of their language and has been for quite a long time. You see, leftists have constantly been pushing for the term for the types of inclusive language that they've been pushing for a very long time. They've been pushing this sorts of things for decades, coming in different forms, but recently it has been most hilariously adapted by the AP Style Guide, where they say, let's not use the word women anymore, or pregnant women anymore. Let's use pregnant people, which just removes a certain aspect of the term. But, of course, we're only going to use that when we're actually talking about trans issues. We're not going to be using that when we're talking about things like, I don't know, abortion or something like that, because that would be too consistent. No, instead, we're going to have continual inaccuracies on this particular front, and this leads into one of the funniest examples of the right actually pushing against this sort of undefining, that being the What is a Woman campaign done by Matt Walsh, which I am very excited to see the movie for and read the book for. I think it's going to be quite funny, and it has already been quite funny in the sense that Matt Walsh has painted the sky with the question above the heads of women's rights protesters who, of course, can't define the term themselves. And leftists have this problem cropping up constantly over their entire ideology, and we've gotten to the point where inclusive language has reached the singularity, because in reality, all inclusive language is making language less particular. And the less language applies to any particular concept, the less particular the word is, the less it means, because the less it is delineating between words, which is the whole point of different words in the first place. And so the endpoint of inclusive language is, of course, for all words to mean exactly the same thing, to have one universal word that can be used in all contexts, in all instances, and tell you nothing about anything at all. And that is what leftists are intent upon doing, and that is where they have gotten to on their bleeding edge, and it is why they have undefined many of their own terms in order to get to this point. Let's take, for example, something like lesbian, something that used to mean girls who got off with getting with other girls, which now means a guy getting off with a girl, and other such things like that. It can mean literally anything, apparently, nowadays. It's amazing to see leftists break down their own ideology for the sake of inclusion, and that has been what they have been doing for a very long time now. Inclusion is going to be the death of all language because, well, at a certain point, nothing means anything anymore, and so all of what leftists say nowadays is simple gobbledygook euphemisms and other such large words that are intended to sound academic and intellectual, but what in reality mean nothing at all. And that's the entire point. The entire point of what leftists have been doing for a very long time is to make everything inclusive. And if you don't believe me, well, go read in some of the early leftist literature. I suggest reading Rousseau, reading Discourses on Inequality, The Social Contract. You see the sorts of things that would happen in leftism and are happening now and are being played out in reality now, being presented in theory with someone like Rousseau. He was introducing the idea that everything should be a universal concern, that particular concerns are simply unacceptable, and that all of them should be destroyed. That was one of the central arguments of the social contract, and how he was going to form this perfect society where everything would be universal. One of the best ways, of course, to do that would be to remove all particular language entirely, and that is how leftists have been subverting culture for a very long time. Though, it is worth it to mention that lots of this has gotten pushback. As previously stated, the Matt Walsh documentary has been a great example, and his whole crusade with the whole what is a woman thing has been a wonderful example of how you deal with these sorts of things. And that is never accept a leftist's framing. They are always trying to take every issue in euphemisms and other such things that simply obfuscate what's actually going on. Take, for example, the abortion debate, which I've talked about a lot, and so I'll keep it brief. But they have continually pushed the idea that they are simply pro-choice, and that they are pro-choice in this instance and no other instances, which makes them pro-choice, and that you should call them pro-choice, when of course they should simply be called pro-abortion. That is the reality of their position, and would be something that I'm perfectly acceptable anyway, because frankly, the pro-life moniker, though I am okay with taking it on and using it against leftism in a language semantic attack, I would honestly prefer to just have the issue, drop the euphemisms entirely, and call it what it is. Pro-abortion and anti-abortion. If you call me anti-abortion, I have no problem with you saying that, because I'm not afraid of my own position. I'm not afraid of you being able to identify what I am. The same cannot be said for leftists. After all, they're anti-discrimination. And what is discrimination? Simply the ability to discern between different things. That's all it is. People will pretend as though it's some evil thing that is always wrong, when in reality, it's something that you do every day and you can't avoid doing unless you want to be, frankly, an invalid. The only sorts of people who cannot discern between different things are quite literally brain dead. And that's because their entire mind functions are not working. Just take, for example, right now. You can already see on your screen, you can discern where the color is red, you can discern where it's white, you can discern where it's black, and all of that is discrimination between these different things because you're determining that all of these things are different. That's all it is. That's all discrimination is. And so, We must be pro-discrimination, in fact. Discrimination is a eminently good thing, because the better you can discern between different things accurately, the better you're going to understand the world around you, and you're going to be able to navigate it in accurate and, most importantly, good ways. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys off. If you enjoyed that video, do subscribe down below and check me out on other platforms. I'm on BitChute, I'm on Odyssey, I'm on Rumble, I'm on Brighteon, I'm on all those places, and all those links are down in the description, along with my Minds, my Gab, and my Getter. Check those all out. I'm KelKidman. This has been Breaking on the Daily. Don't be square.